Give us an idea of, what you're seeing fundamentally change. You mentioned, commercial viability is often the best way to evaluate this. What are some sectors that you're seeing like, hey, they're getting some serious velocity, which you think is going to impact more companies in the future?
So yeah, I'll reference an investment we made earlier this week called Perimeter 81. It was a follow-on investment that we did alongside the lead investor B Capital, but we invested 2 years ago as a lead investor. And the idea is, as you have highly distributed workforces and no longer a centralized kind of network architecture around going into the office, and there's kind of the central office and maybe there's some hubs that are connected to the central office. It's just your endpoint, your computer directly to the cloud or directly to the SaaS application. The idea is now the new corporate network is the open internet. And there's a tremendous amount of need that comes around that in terms of what are the security controls and visibility that goes with that. But how do you also deliver an experience that your business users can work around? I mean, it doesn't make sense to connect from my home through a VPN to a central network when that central network may not even be relevant 5 to 10 years in the future. And fortunately, there have been some foundational technologies that have enabled this, and software-defined wide area networking, SD-WAN as we call it, has been a key kind of initial innovation that's enabled that. But that's where we see a huge degree of opportunity around kind of network security, which besides endpoint is probably the biggest market out there within cyber.
Yeah. So cybersecurity is one of the hottest areas and categories. It's one of the things that becomes, I guess it's every company's problem now, meaning it can quickly become everyone's problem. And we see a lot of investment there. According to a research that was done among CISOs, this was done by our lead sponsor, Salesforce. It's the top data security trends for 2022. They were asked CISOs what different strategies are they going to invest in and become the most effective in defending your organization against cybersecurity attacks. A lot of them talked about, 77% talked about multi-factor authentication, which I thought was interesting because I always assumed that would be 100% in the past. I was kind of taken aback that this was something they were going to invest in, right? 72% identity and access management, 60% data encryption. So there's a lot of the things that we would normally see. Is that something that you're seeing in the cybersecurity space where it's like, are companies continuing to invest in tried and true tools, or are you seeing new emerging technologies forming? Because what you just talked about with Perimeter 81, being able to stand up and securing networks wherever they may be. I know there's a lot of because I was at part of one in 2018. There's a lot of companies trying to do that. It sounds like it's just not quite figured out yet, I guess, because it requires probably equipment requirements and it's not truly to the software layer yet. That's one guess that I'm guessing is potentially a problem.
That's probably why it didn't work back then. Today it's all software, so that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, give us an idea of where do you see these investments going? Because in that security trends, it sounded like they were doing a lot of like things that maybe people already knew about, but I didn't know if it's just because those companies are getting that much better, or there hasn't been, let's say, a widespread adopted better solution yet, that as far as you could tell.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you need to have a 10x improvement on the incumbent technology for you to actually have a viable kind of quote NextGen approach. I mean, you could take something as kind of ubiquitous as endpoint security, right? Or antivirus, the incumbents there, the last gen, the, McAfee, Symantec, like those were rules-based approaches. They would go out, do research, find signatures of bad stuff because it was out in the wild, then they'd embed it back. And so then you do the scan and, everyone loves those old school cybersecurity scans on your laptop. They take forever and they'd be like, oh, we mashed it up. There's a virus here. So it's like, it was a very reactive approach, and it was ubiquitous because you had to have it. But those solutions had efficacy rates in the 50-60% range, and so then you had AI-based anti-malware come onto the scene, and companies like Cylance, which we were investors in and sold to BlackBerry, CrowdStrike, of course, and now SentinelOne, where we went on to also become investors. And this is where you can actually apply machine learning to a setting in the wild, where you're able to take those efficacy rates of the incumbent technologies and bring them from 50% to 99.59% from an anti-malware perspective, using machine learning algorithms on literally the ones and zeros of the executable binary of the file. And so it's just a fundamentally just new paradigm of how you can approach that technology. You could say the same thing with intrusion detection systems and traditional IDS, IPS, and now you apply that to what is called now network traffic analysis. And again, you're applying machine learning and AI to detect what are truly anomalies and potentially malicious anomalies in a way that was never possible before, when you were just kind of checking signatures of known bad against what's out there in your network. And so there are these true like 10x improvements in technology, and a lot of them have been AI enabled, that have come and really taken the market by storm. But going back to your question, like, yeah, there is just a ton of blocking and tackling still to be done. There's still a shocking amount of lack of adoption around sort of simple hygiene. And I mean, I'll reference an article that I think came out in the Wall Street Journal earlier this week, that it was like, what are the top mistakes that lead to breaches at enterprises? And some of them were remarkably simple things, like, have you updated your certificates, your IT certs? We have a company that does that, by the way, called Key Factor, which is doing super well. But those are ticking time bombs in your infrastructure, and they're meant to expire. So if you're not ahead of that, it can create huge security vulnerabilities or operational issues. Another one they mentioned was, updating the software on your endpoint. Like, have you patched? We have another company that does that, by the way, Automox. It's remote cloud-based patching, and so it's but like, again, very simple. And the last one, I think it was vendor risk, which is another really hot topic. We have a company called Prevalent that helps automate the vendor risk assessment process in third parties. The prototypical example being Target, which got breached via their HVAC provider, who happened to have the crown jewels access to the network. So they go from some small provider into the corporate network of a global 2,000 company. So you're only as weak as your weakest link, and that can be this long tail of thousands of third parties that you have. These are the kinds of blocking and tackling that they sound simple, but if you're not ahead of them, those are the exposure points that can be potentially catastrophic.
Hey, thanks for watching. This segment is brought to us by Salesforce Platform. Visit salesforce.com/newsletter to discover timely insights and useful tips tailored to your role. Subscribe to this channel and get more great IT and tech interviews with top industry leaders.